عليكم. سعيدين تواجدكم اليوم معنا هنا، واذا تسمحوا لي بس انا راح تكون بالانجليزي نظرا للغه ضيفنا، راح اتكلم بالانجليزي ان شاء الله، وفي ترجمه اللي حاب يسمع الندوه بالعربي في ترجمه. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for being here with us at Kuwait Economic Society. This evening we're honored to have with us Mr. Tony Bari, the founder and chairman of Moghli Foundation, who will be speaking about creating a balanced entrepreneurship ecosystem. But before we start, please allow me to duly introduce our guest and the foundation he represents. Moghli Foundation is a non-profit organization founded to support the sustainable development of societies through the mentoring of entrepreneurs and leaders. Moghli currently provides mentorship in 11 MENA countries as well as UK, and has alumni of over 1,500 entrepreneurs and mentors. Mr. Bari himself is a serial entrepreneur, having established 18 startup businesses in his career.
Because we can hear you without this.
Yeah, I think so. Mr. Bari himself is a serial entrepreneur, having established 18 startup businesses in his career, and today he operates a number of businesses as well as being heavily involved in developing the Moghli Foundation. He holds an MBA from Manchester Business School, where he was awarded the Brian Elliott Memorial Prize for the leading student for the year. His experience in the MENA region includes working for British Aerospace in Saudi Arabia in 1974 and for another Qatar-based company in 1978, where he also created a further number of startup businesses ranging from oil trading and industrial services. In 1985, Mr. Bari established his own business, a consulting company, and then continued to be involved in acquisitions, starting up and expanding new businesses. I will leave it here with Mr. Bari. For how long is the presentation? 30 minutes?
30 minutes, 35 minutes.
Yeah, and then we'll open up a Q&A session with the audience.
I don't mind questions being asked as I go through it. In fact, the more questions you ask me, the better it becomes and more interactive. So please feel free at any stage. But good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Real pleasure to be here in Kuwait this evening. And thank you to Ali, Russia's who's not with us, and Asia for organising this evening. Real pleasure. I know I've been introduced to you just now, but let me just give you a few key highlights about myself. I have a 50-year relationship with the Middle East, and I know I don't look old enough to have that, but it's amazing how long I have been associated with the Middle East. And I was first in Bahrain in 1966, when my father was in the Royal Air Force, and as mentioned just now, I was in Saudi Arabia, and my greatest achievement in Saudi Arabia in the 1970s was actually to find my Danish wife in a place called Tabuk in Saudi Arabia. Anyone knows Tabuk? You'll know that was really an achievement. And then I moved into Doha, where I set up the first of my businesses, and as you correctly pointed out, I've had 18 startups and businesses, but my 19th startup was the Moghli Foundation. And actually in many ways it's more difficult to set up a not-for-profit foundation than it is a business, as I've learned on the journey. And as you've heard, these businesses were around the energy sector, in oil trading, mechanical, electrical construction, building construction, industrial services, but also in terms of technology around exploration data management and scanning technologies used in the oil industry. And one business in particular you may be aware of is Mead Projects. That was a business I started in the early 2000s. And sold it on to Mead in 2009 when I exited nearly all my businesses. But today I do have 3 businesses left. If anyone would like to buy them from me in Kuwait, I'm more than happy to sell them. I've been trying to exit since 2007 unsuccessfully. But of the 19 businesses, because I consider Moghli a business as well, I've had 2 failures, and 2 very serious failures at that time for me personally. And so I've been there, I've got all the trials and traumas of being an entrepreneur, And my daughter, who is today the chief executive of Moغlì, calls me an entrepreneurial junkie because I keep on going back and starting up new things and doing new things. And you'll hear a little bit about them as we go through it. I've put up a slide here just very briefly because, so what do I do today? I have the pleasure of being involved in living my true values, which is centered around the creation of value and achieving return on investment for businesses and society within areas that I feel so passionately about, such as education. And if you look at the bottom corner, you'll see Power Park College, and I'm delighted to share with you that they will be opening an entrepreneurship academy, the first one in a public school. In Britain we have the very strange way, public school means private. That's a public school, but it's private. The first one in the UK. Secondly, in terms of continuous learning. Thirdly, in entrepreneurship. And fourthly, in the Middle East. And Moghli is all about the Middle East. But in 2004, I felt suffocated, and I use that word quite deliberately, by the success I was having in my businesses. Suffocated as a human being. And I have a great mentor, a man called John O'Neill, who lives in San Francisco, who is the author of a great book called The Paradox of Success. And the paradox is that as you become successful, you give up the things that make you happy. So after much reflection and discussion with other mentors, I realized that I wanted to give back, that I hadn't yet got this new learning curve which I wanted, and nurture my passion for philanthropy. So it's in the area of philanthropy that I now spend 80% of my time, rather than the businesses which I'm still involved in. So what social purpose was Moghli established for, and why? It was established to very simply create more entrepreneurs and more successful entrepreneurs, to benefit from mentoring in their success, but also to create leaders in our society. And you'll hear about that later on during the talk. With the ultimate purpose of creating employment, but of high quality jobs, not just of numbers. Although in some parts of the MENA region, numbers are equally important. Let's just talk about numbers for 1 second. The MENA region need to create 85 million new jobs between 2015 and 2025. And let's put that into perspective. That's a compound growth rate of GDP growth of 8% per annum over 10 years. MENA has never achieved more than 4.5%, including oil and gas revenues. So if you did a calculation today at 2.5% growth rate, which is what it could be, that means there's some 64 million people who will not be employed by the end of 2025. And that's why developing entrepreneurship across the MENA region is really important. But it's interesting that Kuwait has included a new path within its economic development, which is entrepreneurship. And having committed $7.2 billion to champion entrepreneurship within your society, and having waited before embarking on this journey compared to other countries in the region, you have the ability now to learn from others. But what measures of success should you be seeking from such an investment in entrepreneurship? And how can this be achieved? Incidentally, I'm fascinated to learn from you during the course of this evening what is important to Kuwait in taking this really bold initiative. I think it's critical that this is articulated in a really clear vision. But forgive me, I'm putting on my investor hat and I'm putting on my entrepreneurship hat. And let me be bold and share with you what I think is important in terms of measures for investment performance, and what I would be seeking if I was undertaking this. The first measure is creation of wealth outside the oil and gas sector, which can be measured. Secondly, is creating of high quality jobs in society here. Thirdly, is economic regeneration, which is creating new businesses today and new concepts today which don't already exist here. Fourthly, and what's interesting, is creating philanthropists. Philanthropists who don't only give their money back to society, but actually become passionate about what they do. And what's interesting for all of you to know is that 95% of philanthropy, I repeat, 95% of philanthropy comes from entrepreneurs. By the way, you can ask questions, you can challenge at any stage of the evening, because this is a mutual learning. The fifth target is to ensure social democracy, the right of every human being to reach their potential within the country. And the last but not least by a long shot is the development of leadership across society. So, in order that you optimize and maximize your return on investment and performance from entrepreneurship, it is critical to successfully achieve across the entire ecosystem of entrepreneurship a clear balance of support, development and contribution. As the ecosystem develops and as you develop it, it will become increasingly important to continuously monitor where imbalances are occurring and they are being created and define rectifying measures for them. Without this process, your return on investment in entrepreneurship will be sub-optimized. I want to share with you what an ecosystem looks like and what are all the defining parts of it. And as you'll see, there are four key pillars: human capital, environment, access to capital and infrastructure. These are the four pillars upon which the ecosystem needs to be built. And as you'll see under each one of them, there's a number of elements which go into making that particular pillar. This slide can be made available later, by the way, you don't have to write it down. And it's rather like a house with a roof on it. You need these pillars to be grown at the same pace, and you can't put the roof on the top unless you've all got to the same point at the same time. And when you look at this picture, I would like to ask you the following questions. Is it sensible to provide financial capital to entrepreneurs who do not have the required entrepreneurial capability? Absolutely. Absolutely. And would you then be an entrepreneur to establish a business in an environment that can legally expropriate your assets and property rights after you've been successful? You wouldn't. Establish a business in an environment that is quasi-monopolistic or has significant barriers to entry? You wouldn't want to. Start a business with the financial sector either cannot or does not want to support you, particularly during your pain points. Start a business in an environment where you can be wiped out through inadequate bankruptcy laws, or where you have to provide personal guarantees on providing finance during startup. Or establish a business in a society where failure is not celebrated or even tolerated, where you could become a social outcast. Now, I'm posing those challenging questions not for any other purpose than to highlight the requirement for a balance within the ecosystem as it is developed. And please remember that 80% of startups, I repeat, 80% fail in their first business. So we have to provide an environment which supports them both in success and in failure. And we in Moghli, as you heard earlier, have built up an alumni across MENA in 11 countries of 700 entrepreneurs. And from this experience, I would like to share with you what I perceive to be the critical missing element within the MENA entrepreneurial ecosystem. Kuwait hasn't developed it yet, so I can't include Kuwait in that. And without understanding this and addressing this particular element, your collective impact on return on investment will always be undermined and suboptimized. So in order to progress the discussion, I have a question for you. Are entrepreneurs created by nature or by nurture? So can I have a show of hands, all those who think it's created by nature?
Not just two. The nurture is something that you build up.
Yes.
Nature is not the right word in my opinion, because when you study the history of entrepreneurship during the last 50 years, and I have done studies on that, you find minorities, you find, psychologists have done more work on this, the achieving society and these things, than economists. More recently it's the business school rather than economists, although entrepreneurship is one of the four main factors of production. But I don't think nature is the right word. It is the culture they are brought up with.
So are you born with it? Because that's nature.
Not born, you brought up. Not
Brought up-
born means
Brought up
from
is
the
nurture. Being born with it is nature.
nature. Okay.
Being nurtured
Okay.
is, okay?
That's how you define it.
Okay.
Okay.
Absolutely. Sorry.
Can it be like a normal curve where you have both extremes, nature and nurture, and the majority in the middle? You can be one way or another. You can develop it.
So I would agree with you that there are certain genes and traits which may come from your family background. But what's interesting in saying that is that within a single family you'll always find great differences between brothers of the same genes.
Yes, that's true.
So you can have those traits and they can be there to support you, but I would reckon about 90% comes from nurture. 90%.
Both are important.
But the real creation of the entrepreneur is coming from the nurture process, which we want to go into detail on. So therefore, what's really important for developing entrepreneurs is to achieve a balance between human capital development and financial capital and access to financial capital. And this is really relevant, for example, in the MENA region. Let me share with you, there's a MOOC. Everyone knows what a MOOC is? A mass online open source course, which was held about 3 months ago on the developing of entrepreneurship ecosystems in transitioning economies. There was 21,700 people live listening to this MOOC around the world. It was from Cleveland University. And what was really interesting on that panel session, as I was on it, is it's a 1-hour session. And 45 minutes had gone, and we hadn't even discussed human development. We only discussed financial. And there's a reason for that. Talking about finance is really easy. Talking about human development is tough. We have to expose ourselves and take off all our masks. So that's why we don't do it. But if we don't have human capital, we ain't going to succeed. And what's the first stage of this nurture process? It's when the baby's born. And it's the parenting. And whilst parents, and I'm a parent too, need to make sure their children are safe, they also must make sure that they're not overprotected as they're brought up. And they get space and a chance to fail, learn, and try again themselves. And they need to have suitable challenges where they can feel those challenges allow them to be empowered at a very early stage. And I'm talking about 0 to 5, by the way, during that period of time. And then they can grow. And during their schooling days, when they have primary education, they must acquire 2 entrepreneurial traits. One is curiosity, and one is skepticism. And the schooling must, at primary stage, encourage those 2 aspects. And then beyond that, into secondary and tertiary education, they need to learn and develop their own problem-solving capability at different levels, in secondary as they grow up, and then at university on tertiary education. Because problem-solving is really where entrepreneurship is born. They need networking skills, they need communication skills, and they need to have the right behaviors. And we're not talking here about behaviors, by the way, behaving properly. It's the behaviors in the work that they do. But there are lots of other elements that come into it. For instance, are they able to make personal choices that allow them to lead their lives the way they wish to lead them? Do they have a good peer group with which they can develop their aspirations, question and learn? Do they have entrepreneurial leadership models who have been successful ethically despite the challenges that they face? Do they have access relations with mentors in their lives that they can interact with, learn from, develop themselves and be challenged by? So who can recognize anyone in this photograph? Steve Jobs.
And Bill Gates.
Bill Gates.
Reid Hoffman.
Sorry?
Reid Hoffman.
Yes. The #1 angel investor in Silicon Valley. Okay. So how many of you know who is the lucky entrepreneur who had all three of these working with him? And if some of you have been watching the slides earlier, you got the answer, so please keep quiet. Any ideas? Mark Zuckerberg. And what's really interesting about Silicon Valley is that 6 individuals, I repeat, 6 individuals have had a hand in creating 90% of the value creation in Silicon Valley. And they don't measure themselves through money, they measure themselves through influence that they have. Okay? It's fascinating. It's a plot where all the interlinkages have come. So Mark Zuckerberg was a really lucky chap, a really lucky entrepreneur, to have these 3 people guiding him. There's a model I'm now going to share with you, which is, to me, supports a lot about entrepreneurship. It's called The Hero's Journey. It's a piece of philosophy written by a guy called Joseph Campbell. Some of you may have seen it before. And the hero in this instance is the entrepreneur. I need to go around and just help you out as we go through the journey together. So you start in this ordinary world. And how many times have you had a call to change and you have refused the call? Until somebody says to you, yes, you can do that. And if that person is somebody you trust and you have confidence in, you'll listen to them. And you may decide to take it up. And that person typically is a mentor in your life. And then when you cross the line, imagine you're changing from your working in a bank to creating a startup. Once you've crossed the line and left the bank, you're now under trial. You have no idea whether you're going to succeed or not. Now you have to create a new group of allies, friends, a new support network if you're going to succeed. And enemies, this is an interesting one. Because what happens is that when you cross the line, many of your previous friends are actually quite jealous of you for the new life you've now created for yourself. So they become enemies and try and thwart you in many different ways. And then you enter the most important element of all, the facing the darkness. This is the storm. So imagine yourself, you've started a business, you've got $100,000 in the business, you've mortgaged your house, you haven't told your wife, and the next day you could go bankrupt. It's a hell of a place to be. If you succeed, you will learn a lot. If you fail, you'll learn even more. And you'll take that learning into a new perspective and take it back into the new ordinary world. So why am I so stupid to have done this journey 19 times? And why is it so important? Because the entrepreneur is created in this storm. Because every time you go into the storm, you learn so much more. Your capability grows. You grow as a person. and you know how to handle many more things you ever knew before you went on this journey. That's why philanthropists are created. Because they've been on this journey so many times, they're so grateful to be alive and to have their income and their asset. And it's osmosis that they want to give back. It's not anything else. They've been seriously hurt in the process. There's a paper I read a few weeks ago which called The Psychological Effects of Being an Entrepreneur. It can be damaging, but it's really worthwhile. Because when you come through it, as many of us have done so, you become, I think, a greater human being, but you've actually thoroughly enjoyed the challenge you've been through. So that hero's journey explains an awful lot about entrepreneurship. You've got to have a baptism of fire in that thought there. Any questions on the hero's journey? 'Cause it's really important.
In terms of age, I mean, what sort of age groups go through this journey? I mean, is there like any statistics or numbers in terms of at what phase of person's life they go through this journey?
So, applying it to entrepreneurs only, or applying it to human beings as well. Because you can be in this storm, for example, if tomorrow morning you're diagnosed with cancer. Okay? So you can have it at any time, and you can grow through having that cancer, by the way. You can grow in terms of a person. Absolutely. Those storms of life. Now, most entrepreneurs, and I can only talk from myself personally, my first major storm was when I was 6 years old. When I had my tonsils and adenoids cut out, and the surgeon cut my palate, so I don't speak normally. I actually have found a way to speak. So for 1 year I didn't speak at school. Okay? So all these help you to overcome the challenges. And then when you become into your teenage years, there's challenges again. And then when you start your first business, there's challenges again. All these build your capability. Sorry, Ali.
You're describing it like a battlefield.
It is.
And the one that caught my attention is two things. One, you're talking about the enemies, basically, or creating enemies, or an adverse environment that prevents you from reaching your full potential. Would that be true, or is it in one's mind? I mean, why would the environment or your peer group or your friends fight you? I mean, why would they hate your success? It's not that obvious to me.
So let me give you a lovely parallel example. Who are the best angel investors in entrepreneurs? They are. Huh?
Serial entrepreneurs.
No. No, it's interesting.
Family.
The best are bankers, accountants, lawyers. These are the best three categories. What they have inside them is that they're what I call a wannabe entrepreneur. They're not prepared to take the risk, but they want to have a bit of fun around entrepreneurship. So they allocate 10% of their money to entrepreneurship, angel investing. And they work with those entrepreneurs. So they're not at risk themselves, but they love it. Now, why I say that is because in parallel, once you've crossed boundaries, I'm giving a talk at Cambridge University on the 23rd of March, which is called Managing Boundaries. It's based upon a professor called Red Rubens, you know, has a name. Once you break a boundary, it's so difficult to ever recover it. If you think about your own relationships, when you walk out of a meeting and slam the table, you're never accepted back properly. The boundary is closed behind you. And the same thing here. The boundary is closed once you become an entrepreneur. By many people. Many people. Okay. That's why. That's a human process. Has any entrepreneur had an experience of that? Here? Have you? You do. Yeah. It's amazing.
Going back to your previous slide, the doors shut down. Is that
Doors don't shut down. People, in some way, they're jealous that you've made this bold decision. Okay. What I share with you, everything I've talked about, it's a minor one. It's the one that's quite easy. The more important one to get right is not the past people, it's the allies. You need a new network of friends to help you. That was really important. I mean, I've never heard of an entrepreneur tripping out because of his enemies. He's not been supported by them, absolutely.
Okay, one more question. So you're saying that meeting the mentor,
Yeah.
a lot of times, we see it in our business, encouraging whether it's colleagues or partners to move on, and it's not, usually the biggest barrier is the self-confidence. I mean, no mentor can re-establish self-confidence in someone's mind when the self-confidence is shattered. That is, usually I find that this is the biggest challenge.
So what's interesting is when we run the mentoring programs, the first thing the entrepreneurs tell me is that my mentor is confident in me. And that's such a blessing. Okay? You have to get, and I'll talk about it, you have to get inside the soul of a person. It's very difficult to get in the soul of a person when you're all working in the same organization. And that's one kind of makes you look. That self-confidence, you're dead right. If you can't generate it and get empowerment in that relationship, it's difficult to make it. And that's why within organizations, most of the mentoring that takes place is what I call sponsored mentoring. And what I mean by that is that people try and create clones of themselves within the organization. And we've all seen that. But I'm not saying it for 1 minute, by the way, that mentoring an organization is not important. I think it's really important. But it's difficult because of the boundaries that exist. We are a human being. We have a personal life and a business life. And we're completely intertwined. Quite often in a work situation, it's difficult to get involved in the personal side. We only have access to the side of the business side. And that's one of the big differences. And we'll come back to questions, I'm sure, later. How do you select a mentor? And what are the characteristics?
Excuse me. You said lawyers and accountants. These are entrepreneurs who come from these two professions, or the other way around?
These are people who make typically good angel investors.
Investors.
Angel investors. Okay? Not that they could become entrepreneurs, but they tend not to. They stay in that profession.
Because of the profession, I
Yes,
think.
they stay in the profession.
Yes.
But this is their excitement time. And they put a bit of money in. So, as we move forward, let us not shirk from asking a few fundamental questions. Are we creating the environment to nurture entrepreneurs during their childhood and adolescent years within the region? Question 1. Question 2. Have we created an ecosystem within MENA which effectively nurtures, supports and nourishes entrepreneurs? And if we don't do those two things, it will be really difficult to create entrepreneurs in the region. Unfortunately, we're not doing it. As a result of that, to be an entrepreneur in MENA today is 5 to 10 times more difficult than in Europe and America. 5 to 10 times. So, for example, if you ask me today, which is the most difficult country in the Middle East to form a company and get a business going and running, it's Palestine. Not because of the Israeli issue, or the inherent issues within Palestine.
Which is
First of all, there's a disease which I've caught it recently called donoritis. Ever heard of it? Is it? Donoritis. They're so used to just being given money by all the foreign donors. So that's how they run their lives. They just want people to give them money.
it takes a lot of entrepreneurship to get funded.
How many NGOs do you think there are working in the West Bank today? Give me a number.
Yeah, I know there are a whole lot of
And
them.
how many?
My Palestinian friends tell me they have many restrictions about Palestinians and how they should behave to get the right funding. I mean, they have to turn their back to their cause to get the funding.
There are 3,800 NGOs currently being funded in the West Bank. I repeat, 3,800. So donor right is number one. Number two is the whole regime has been set up around the donor funding. The government, the private sector, it's all there.
And
So it's great.
that means it's a big entrepreneurship. They got 3,800 entrepreneurs.
I wish so. I wish so. So how do our entrepreneurs in our alumni, what do they think of their journey? So the first thing is these entrepreneurs feel very, very lonely. They feel a heavy loneliness in their lives. They have a lack of empowerment to ask for help. And they don't make the choices for themselves. They've always got something else which is making the choices for them. They have a lack of confidence in their own ability, Ali, number one. And to succeed in their own decisions. They have a fantastic nervousness of failure and its implication on them and their families. Lack of parental and family support for taking the decision to become an entrepreneur. I'll share with you a lovely one, because it is funny. I did programs in Syria before the crisis, and I stopped doing them because I could not see the entrepreneurs being successful. Secondly, I asked the entrepreneurs, what is the biggest challenge you are facing in your life? And the male, which was about 70% of our entrepreneurs, said, we cannot marry the girl that we want to marry. And I said, pardon? You can't marry this? No, because when we found the lady we want to marry, and that girl goes home to the father says, you're not marrying an entrepreneur. He must be in the government department, or he must be a doctor or an engineer. No way an entrepreneur. So they have to give up their business in order they want to marry the right person. So family support is important. They're unable to address their personal doubts or have a healthy work-life balance. These are all challenges they're facing. So given these, if we're not able to get to the soul of the entrepreneur and get inside them, we are not going to help them through all the barriers they have in being a successful entrepreneur. So what human capital interventions and support can we provide the entrepreneurs who today have already, and this is a really important point, the majority of entrepreneurs we're going to be talking to today have already gone through their childhood, their primary education, their secondary education, their tertiary education. It's going to take us 25 years to get that right, to get the next group through. So what are we going to do for them today to help them on their entrepreneurial journey? So conceptualizing human capital development is very simple around the definition of a word called competency. And competency is derived from three elements: skills, knowledge, and behaviors. Now, if for a particular attribute you measure skills and it's the highest level, level 4, and your your knowledge is also level 4, but your behaviors is level 1, which is the lowest. What's your score on that competency? It's not, isn't it? It's not. It's the lowest common denominator. Okay? So the area we need to focus upon is behavioral, because we have today many areas. In skills, for example, you have training and coaching available, but the feedback is provided by a test. You have knowledge, which can and should be gained through activities such as reading, training and listening to advice. But again, it is through tests we understand whether you're making progress or not. But behaviors are typically developed through experiential, upon which your feedback is provided to you, which allows you to judge whether you are actually improving or not. So to survive these storms, which I showed you earlier, and to significantly enhance your long-term likelihood of success, we strongly advocate and support entrepreneurs to have mentors along that journey. Does anybody in here have a mentor? One, two, three. Anyone have more than one? How many have you got?
Three.
Three? Five, good.
Five.
And does anybody have a mentor younger than them? I have 14. 14, and I have mentors younger than me. I have women, I have all religions, all nationalities. It's amazing. It's a support structure which I would cherish you all to try and put in place for yourself. It's fantastic. How am I doing for time? Okay. I want to just talk a little bit about what Moghli does, and now are we able to show the film?
Yeah, we should be.
Okay. Let's show the film. I just want to show a film.
It's on the pause actually. I think.
I'll let you do it. So this is a very short film. It's no more than 4 minutes long. We managed to get the G8 to fund a program in the Middle East to bring mentoring to 6 countries, which was Morocco, Libya, Egypt, Tunisia, Yemen and Jordan. These 6 countries. And this is a short film on just 3 of the countries and some of the feedback we have received. That's it, yep. We get sound as well?
They should have the system.
The sound.
The sound system, can we have it up? Several link.
This initiative is very important, especially now to those who need a voice.
The Arab Spring has brought people's energy out, people's aspirations, dreams, people wanting to create new things, take responsibilities, take control over their lives.
Entrepreneurship essentially is the single most powerful economic and social mobility.
Mentoring is the only way that can give the opportunity to share knowledge. This knowledge we will not find it in the university, we will not find it in financial school, we will find it only by having a mentor in conflict. We have this great challenge on Friday. Politics, stability, security, fiscal, finance.
Life is difficult. Yeah. So in these very sensitive moments, it's really important to have somebody who takes your hand and truly conveys positivity.
Come on, that's most. Things are changing. Have an opportunity to behave differently. Mentoring allows that it's out of the box. It's something that's not been tried before. It's something that is forcing us to learn from others. I think this is the most important action.
أنا ليلى الحجي مديرة مركز الأعمال وبعدين قررت إني أعمل مساعدة مشروع صغير بالداخل البيت مشروع زي الخياطة زي الطبخ زي المعجنات زي عن طريقهم عن طريق استعرفت على برنامج فرصة الخضروات اللي أحتاجها وكانت الفرصة هذه بالنسبة لي أكبر Egypt inspired. I think thanks to the Lord. That was the first cupcake store in Egypt. It started on October 11, 2010. And it's a family-run business here in Egypt. There is an entrepreneurial spirit for sure. People are no longer trying to compete because we're going through very hard times. People are relying in there's lots of partnerships. Let's go from another. We discuss my future mission and share it, and then meeting an entire pool of people, where it's the marketeers, the financiers, the people that handle the operations of giant companies. You're blessed to meet all these people in one room. And now that I have Ahmed as a mentor, it's all making me where I'd like to go.
Yes, that's much better mentors that I've had on average experience. That's a clinical experience in 6 years. I can't buy this experience in 6 clinical. I want to trade that what I can.
This initiative can help Arab countries better understand the challenges faced by entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, and promote an environment which can thrive.
That's a short film of a major program done last year. It was done. It was done by a consortium of 3 parties, which was Moghli, ASI, and Portal, and funded by DFID to take mentoring for the first time into many of these countries. And it's been very successful. So let me just share with you what Moghli does. So what we do is we recruit, we train, so we recruit, select, and train mentors. We then recruit, select entrepreneurs, and match the two together. And we then give them an experiential couple of days together to bond their relationship. And it's all about human relationship. It's not about sector. It's about 2 human beings coming together that we think will make a great partnership together. And one of the nicest stories I've got in terms of partnerships to show you how things work is a lady in Lebanon who is a Hezbollah girl, very left-wing. Her mentor is a right-wing guy from private equity, age 55, she's age 24. Her business has gone through the roof as a result. She's actually now moved from Lebanon to the United States, and taken our whole business out of Lebanon to the United States, and is continuing to grow her business. But there's two ends of the spectrum, which you'd never expect them to be a relationship that has been found. And what I'd like to just in closing take you to a few points, which is do get yourself a mentor. For those of you who've not got a mentor, please try and get yourself a mentor. For those of you who've got mentors, maintain the relationship because they become real pillars and shapers for your life. Source new mentors all the time, younger, older, they're all different genders. And as you in, is this going to work? More slide, that's all that I've done. So, I just leave you with the immortal words of Mahatma Gandhi. Be the change you wish to see in the world. Be the change you wish to see in Kuwait. If you want change to take place, it has to come from the people. It has to come from the human capital. Any questions? Thank you. Please, yeah, many.
Shall I go ahead or close?
I want to thank you for this excellent presentation. I'd like to thank Ali for the introduction as well. I'm impressed by the fact that you took the time and adapted your presentation to the MENA region itself, in the time where most of the other eminent speakers who come and go to Kuwait hardly dedicate a single slide to this part of the world. So obviously you've done a lot of research on that, and we appreciate it. And I know most of your work in the foundation is in the MENA region. I would like to go back to your definition of an entrepreneur, and I'm struggling with something that is not very clear in my mind. I feel that because the United States is the most advanced market, so to speak, for entrepreneurship and innovation, I think most of the portrayal of entrepreneurship that we see is associated one way or another to the United States and Silicon Valley. Angel investors, Bill Gates, whatever. I mean, all those smart people that you put here. And there is something paradoxical in my mind, in the sense that if I'm sorry if I'm going to be a little philosophical here, but if entrepreneurship is about willpower and determination and fighting adversity, how come we see that the largest concentration of entrepreneurs come actually from a region that is extremely benign and kind to investors? That is, how come, my question is, if entrepreneurship is about willpower and fighting adversity and showing determination to go against the tide, so to speak, how come we see it in a region that is the United States, that is extremely kind in terms of its ecosystem to its entrepreneurs? You have all sorts of funding, you have angel investors, you have lots of innovation. You actually have an entrepreneurial state itself that does a lot of base research that gives to people like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs all the kind of research for them to market their projects. And we don't see. What I want to say is that the model you have depicted, like many others, is actually a purely US model that doesn't necessarily apply in other parts of the world. In my opinion, to produce an entrepreneur, you need an army of policymakers who actually understand the region and the cultural challenges and come up with policies that suit the region and not imported from somewhere else. This is not a statement about your presentation. This is what I fully believe.
I want to engage on that basis.
Yes.
I think, first of all, I couldn't agree with you more. Your culture is completely different than the United States in every sense of the word. Number one. Number two, and I agree with you that Silicon Valley today, or America, is packaging these entrepreneurship programs and selling them around the world. And one size does not fit all. I think in terms of what happens in Silicon Valley, I go back to what I said earlier. 6 people have created 90% or been involved in 90% of the value creation. Those 6 people are themselves entrepreneurs who've transcended to a level, a state, where money is no longer any object. So they want to give back in all sorts of ways. I was in Iran last week. I'll share with you a statistic which I found wondrous. 700 Iranians in America today are worth $1 trillion. Now, the question I have for policymakers in the Middle East is a very easy question to answer. Do you wish to champion Arabic entrepreneurship, or do you want to champion entrepreneurship in the Arab world? Okay? Because when you look at Silicon Valley, you look at London, you look at the percentage of immigrant entrepreneurs is 70% plus. All those Iranian entrepreneurs in the States are the people. So there's a dichotomy there. In terms of policy, absolutely, the infrastructure model. By the way, that my ecosystem was a way of getting away from the USA. By the way, I was in the 60s. I drew that a long time ago. I saw all their models coming out. I didn't agree with them. And you won't see parenting on their model, by the way. So it's put in there. So I think the hardship part, every entrepreneur has been through that. I have not met one who has not been through it. Policymakers have to put the policies in place. And that's what I was trying to hit at earlier. If I look at MENA region, since the World Economic Forum in 2010 in Oman, there hasn't been one piece of legislation brought out. Not one in MENA. Okay. If you really want entrepreneurship, you have to put the right policies in place. But the right policies start with human capital. Without human capital, we're all wasting our time. We can put the infrastructure in place, we can put the policies in place, we need human capital. So I agree with you. I'm not prepared to give you the name of the organisation, but there's one organisation I know very well who has been highly successful in the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the Far East, has brought their model to the Middle East and it's failed. Because of culture. Okay. And having got the alumni now, where we've had 700 entrepreneurs, many of the things we're putting forward today is because of the data we've collected in the MENA region on those entrepreneurs. And I think human capital is the one area within MENA which needs to be the number one pillar which needs to focus. You have all the financial capital available. You need to have the environment, yes, and the policy around infrastructure. I agree. That's human capital number one.
Yeah, actually my question was an extension to Manaf's and the discussion in terms of if we wear the policymakers' hat or the entities that is designed or have as their task to provide this intervention in a market that's not exactly functioning, to give or to boost entrepreneurship and SMEs. And some of us, I see some of our colleagues as well in terms of who are playing a part in this newly established fund to promote entrepreneurship and SMEs. What advice do you give us in terms of policy making or policies within those entities that are supposed to boost entrepreneurship and create the ecosystem? And are you saying we are bound to fail if the human capital is not there?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
If you don't develop human capital, entrepreneurship will never succeed. Full stop. No ifs, no buts, no maybes. But I want to share. Maybe I was a bit subtle in my wording earlier. Okay? Because I was. What do you want to achieve as Kuwait? What are the outcomes you would like to achieve? What is your vision? Why are you doing it? That's the first point I'd start at. Get a really clear vision of why you're doing it and how you'll measure it. And then only then look at what policies you need to put in place to achieve that. Because for me, when I look at Kuwait, and I put Qatar in the same category, the real need you have as people is leadership across your society.
So can you repeat that again?
Leadership across your society. Depth of leadership. Tonight there's a rugby game being played right at this very minute. England versus Ireland. I'm using a sporting analogy. If England's leadership within their team, not just one person, not the captain, but 5 or 6 players show leadership on the pitch, they will win the game. It's not about one person. If they don't, we'll lose the game. So how do we create that depth of leadership and diversity of leadership in different areas of society? That and only then, I think you will have a really successful career. And if that's your goal from the Entrepreneurship Fund, in your vision, then I think it's fantastic.
I think there is some clarity in terms of the goals and the objectives. I mean, needless to say, we all know the imbalances that our economy faces in terms of reliance on single source of income, in terms of the public sector and the way it dominates the economy and all that. And we'd like to move away from that, create jobs. We have, demographic imbalances as well in terms of, the younger generation, the 60%, we need to provide jobs, all that. We all know those imbalances, and this intervention is designed to move away from the reliance on the single source of income, promote, enlarge the private sector. So we're clear about the objective now. What I'm saying is, we know there's some deficiency in the human capital. When I say this, is like the quality of education. Okay, we know there are shortcomings. With that, I mean, how can we? This is a reality today, how can we adjust and make those interventions as successful as possible, taking that into account?
And that's why I raise the subject of childhood, primary, secondary and tertiary education. Today you've got a whole bunch of people who've gone through that already, and you can't change what they've received already. How are you going to take them forward? Policies in terms of education can change for the future, but not for those people. Okay? And the only way you can help those people, if they have got entrepreneurial talent, is to help them through with human development interventions.
Are you mentoring?
Skills number one. The easiest two are skills number one, knowledge number two, and the behaviors come from coaching and mentoring. Those three areas.
Because I can argue in Kuwait that you do have the skills, you do have the talent. I think it's deep enough. I mean, Kuwait as a nation was founded and built on the back of entrepreneurship. These are merchants who came from deep peninsula, which is now Saudi Arabia, or from southern Iraq, and some from the Arabian coast of Iran, and they came to Kuwait in pursuit of basically something, and that something is typically trade and entrepreneurship. The very foundation of Kuwait is one of entrepreneurship. And something went haywire. So the attitude was there, the behavior was there, and was there for a long time. And something went sideways. Today, I, as a business executive, I can tell you the skill sets are there. The knowledge is there. But basically the behavior has been impacted by what you said, the donor. I mean, in fact,
in different way, yeah.
Different way. It's basically the government that has been employing every single graduate, and that has left a lot of the young people not so hungry, basically, to achieve. So it is the ambition, in effect, or the need for success that is a bit lacking. And then how do you alter that? I agree with you, education for the future, it's something a totally different ballgame. But then that behavior, how do you attempt to this behavior? I was discussed a lot with Aisha on this domain.
Behavior comes from coaching and mentoring. Feedback. And honest feedback. I mean, for me, a mentor is somebody who tells you the truth, not necessarily what you want to hear. Okay? And you have the confidence to listen to that person. Absolutely.
Tony, I think in the context of Kuwait, it's also the larger policy formulation which also needs some deeper dive into. Because right now, if you look at our nationalization policies, for example, it's all about cajoling, right? So we've got, we're saying we've got percentage for Kuwaitization, we've got special quotas for Kuwaitization, etc., etc. Until and unless we create an urgency, until and unless we create accountability, some kind of a fear that look, there has to be accountability, there has to be performance. Mentoring and coaching alone won't work. No. Because an individual cannot survive without that entire system around it. So I think it's time for change of a broader nature. That's just my personal view.
I don't want to get into politics though tonight. This can really drift off.
Yeah, but we can count on the youth to take us to politics, probably the second row.
Well, I have a question then. It's a bit different. Well,
before apologies, did anyone read Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid's strategy for Dubai in August last year? It's a very short piece.
Yeah.
What do you say? My job is to get the world's best talent into Dubai, and then they'll take care of me. That was it. That's his strategy. Very simple. And it's working. Sorry.
Yeah, my question was, here in Kuwait, with your experience in the MENA region, in Kuwait we do have, let's say, some sort of characteristic of the ecosystem that the private sector is dominant by big companies. So the entrepreneurs, without the support of the private sector, they can't, let's say, succeed. So entering this market, should they compete? Should they complement the well-established companies, existing companies?
So that's why I put in one of the questions was, what's the question again? I specifically in for Kuwait, by the way. Establish a business, we do as an entrepreneur, establish a business in an environment that is quasi-monopolistic.
Yeah.
Very specifically. Okay, I wouldn't. No way. I mean, there comes a policy dimension then, which says how it is the government going to put a policy in place which ensures its business environment is conducive to all. Only the government can do that. Which is interesting from another perspective. Why is it that ICT is the #1 entrepreneurship sector in the MENA region? Because there's no WASTA on the internet. Okay? Very simple.
I mean, I know the current status, relatively speaking, to Europe or the West and the States is not up to standard. But I think everything is also relative. But if you look at what's been happening over the past 5 to 10 years, in the whole region, there has been a plethora of entrepreneurial activity across the whole 9 yards, from all the different relative stakeholders, be it from government in terms of policy making, be it from private sector, be it from corporate partnerships with entrepreneurs. There are venues, there are communities being established. But I wouldn't undermine how important that shift has been over the past 5 years specifically. As an entrepreneur today, there are plenty of venues to go to, seek access to funding, access to markets, proper mentoring programs, and they're quite useful. But I'd like to paint a more rosy picture. And I think despite all the challenges you've highlighted, we've also seen great success stories. And on the ICT note, I think ICT is amplified, super amplified. That's most of the activity, 90% of the activity is actually in non-ICT related entrepreneurship activities. But it's a half full, half empty kind of glass. I think it's half full, and it can only get better.
I hope you're right.
I know it's
number one.
And I'm
saying
we're witnessing progress on daily basis, seriously.
The only thing I'd ask you to reflect upon, not necessarily answer, is how are you measuring that?
So,
okay. Secondly, there absolutely is a whole raft of initiatives within the Middle East. But are they actually producing necessary outcomes? Okay. Which country would you put as #1 today on the MENA Entrepreneurship Index?
Yeah, the index covers a wide range of perspectives.
Which country?
If you take, for example, Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, which is LBSL and BAPSL, the UAE would probably top that. However, in terms of volume and activity, UAE is not up there. You take countries like Saudi, countries like Egypt, countries like Morocco, which will top the transaction or volume base.
So in Dubai, it's really interesting because the vast majority of entrepreneurs in Dubai are Arab. And it comes back to my question earlier. Do you wish to create Arabic entrepreneurs or entrepreneurship in the Arab world?
And that's when we mentioned...
That's why I asked the question.
That volume-wise, UAE is not the best example. You take Saudi as an example, you take Egypt as an example, Morocco. These are the countries that are producing a majority of entrepreneurs in our part of the world.
So, I don't have experience of running mentoring programs in Saudi. I'm delighted to share with you, however, that we will be launching a program in Saudi Arabia as part of that initiative this year. We've already been instructed to do so. But I think where I'm coming from is that the vast majority of those initiatives have been around access to finance. If you ask entrepreneurs today, what is it you need for us to help you? What will they answer?
Where?
Everywhere.
No, I think they vary, relatively speaking.
Money.
From one country. No, I disagree. If you ask anyone in the room in Kuwait, as an entrepreneur, what would you need? They'll tell you that the bureaucracy of government processing and paperwork is the number one hurdle and challenge that entrepreneurs face. So it's a relative term. As a matter of fact, access to finance through the GCC has never, at least for the past 5 years, never been an issue.
And come on, across MENA, you ask entrepreneurs what they want, it's always access to finance. Okay? Number one. Number two, if you go to banks and ask them what is required to help the entrepreneurship ecosystem, they will say to you, finance.
Banks?
Banks will say finance for SMEs is number one, providing the central bank take the risk away from them. And they create a profitable business opportunity. Okay? It's self-fulfilling. Lana, go on. Sorry.
It's a very interesting actually point, and this is one thing that we always focus on when we're doing our mentoring programs. It's basically about changing the mindset of the entrepreneurs, because when you start what are the obstacles, such focusing on the policies and the procedures or the financing, which is always the case wherever you go in any country. Like I've been in 6 countries so far, and in all countries they are always the same. It's basically changing that into what do you really want to be. If you want to be an entrepreneur, there can be some kind of an alumni working together to overcome all these issues. So this is what we're trying to say, that the human capital is the starting point where you can start of changing their mindset. If you want something within Kuwait and you want to change it, as a group of businessmen or as entrepreneurs, you can make that change happen. And that's why we always, when he finished Tony in his speech, he said, be the change that you want to be, to make it the world or in Kuwait. So just let's not focus on that, let's go into the different model of
I will share my experience from a lecturer at Arab Open University. What was interesting actually, there's a lot of students who's eager to start their own business. And some students already they started their business. So, and unfortunately they are facing the problem with the environment. Yes, they have some skills, but with mentoring they don't have the right mentor. That's another question, how to find the right mentor here. Also, there are some of the students, they start and fail, and they're shy to say that we fail in our businesses. So I think also the culture has a problem here. So my question is how to find the right mentoring, or for the entrepreneurs themselves, or like the funds, how to make a group of mentors for some of the entrepreneurs.
Yeah. So on a personal basis, let me answer the question in terms of how do you find the right mentor. It's got to be somebody you would trust. Without that, you cannot build a relationship. It's somebody who will, whatever they do, only act in your interest and not have a sub-agenda in any form or shape. It's somebody who you believe has experience, expertise, wisdom, which will help you in your journey. And that wisdom, by the way, has to be across both your personal side and your business side in life. Because with an entrepreneur, they're so tightly linked. Whatever happens in your business life affects your personal life, and vice versa. And finding them is not easy. But my recommendation to you, on a personal basis again, and I'll answer from the Mogi point of view, is go into your database. You've all got iPhones with lots of people in there. Go to the top 10 people you would like to have as your mentor. Okay? And if I come to you tomorrow morning and say to you, please, I would love you to be my mentor, how do you feel? You feel proud. You're never going to say, get out of here. You might say to me, I'm too busy, I apologize, I just can't. If you ask me today, I'll tell you I'm already mentoring 22 people. I can't take any more on board. Okay? But I'll never refuse it. If you said to me, can I have 5 minutes of your time, I'd never refuse. So engage with them, talk to them, but choose the top 10 and go after it. Okay?
What's the profile of a typical mentor? I mean, has to be someone who has done successful things in the past, or can it be just a good uncle, for instance?
It can be a good uncle. Providing they are acting in your best interest, and providing you trust them, they will have a perspective. Now, I said earlier, I think I did, I have 14 mentors. Sometimes my mentors give me different advice and different pointers, different empowerment. And it's my decision which way I go. Okay? And I'm happy to receive that, providing it's in my best interest. Okay? It's when it's not in my best interest that I drop the mentor.
I know you're steering away from politics. Yeah. But you also implicitly acknowledge that the existing ecosystem, the Arab world, if it ever exists, is hardly conducive to entrepreneurship. So, and we all know, I can say it on your behalf, the Arab world is in a mess now.
Yes.
Actually, we live a very low point now. So, where do we start? Yani, I know most people will say education, but can we be more specific than that and address the really critical elements?
Authentic leadership. Authentic leadership. For example. At the World Economic Forum meeting held in January this year, there are 3 key items on their agenda. The first one was income inequality around the world. The second one was jobless growth. The world is seeing economic growth, but no jobs being created from the growth. The third one is lack of leadership. Okay? So for me today, that third one is what is required. When I was in Iran last week, I have a guy I'm mentoring who took me there. And we had a meeting in a public place, and I said, leadership. And I was told, you can't talk about leadership, Tony, here. Because they believe there's only one leader in this country. So please, don't raise it. Okay? Why I'm saying that, it's a broad-based leadership that's required in all societies.
I'm sorry, I'm hijacking the question. Now that you talk about leadership, I think there is a pop culture about leadership going on here. We see all sorts of, I don't want to give names, but we see all sorts of, guru leaders who come and speak about US experiences and US models. You're not one of them, by the way. I acknowledged in the beginning that you did your homework. but our youth are infatuated by this guru pop culture of leadership that is based upon selling more, taking good picture, managing time, talking about certain human skills. Is this everything about leadership that we see in mainstream books, or is it a bit more than that?
So let me give you my personal definition and Moghli's definition of leadership. To serve is to lead. To serve is to lead. If I serve your interest, you will follow me. By the way, I don't need to be called a leader.
Okay.
And that's when I said earlier, authentic leadership.
Okay. So you try to identify the needs of your community, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and try to fulfill
what's in their best interest as a community, and to fulfill them. Okay? And if that is done, life will be successful. Sorry.
I have 2 quick questions. The first is, Moghli, is that the character from Jungle Book?
Yes.
Am I still on the tape recorder? Absolutely.
Okay.
It is. Okay? And why?
Please, yes.
Okay. So what happens in the Jungle Book? You've seen it?
Yes.
What's happening?
So Mowgli's, I'm hoping most of you watched Jungle Book, but he's brought into the jungle without parents and lost. The animals take care of him and he grows up. And
so you said something really important. The animals take care of him.
Yes.
The animals mentor him. Some of the mentors were good. He was not. Okay? That's why. If I called up the Mentoring Foundation, you'll never remember me. That's why. The whole film is around mentoring.
Okay. Now I have a new perspective on the...
Okay.
My second question is, what's the business model? I mean, do you do this as a philanthropy, or is it like an actual revenue generating? And how? What's
No, okay. So it was founded by me, and I'm a philanthropist, so it's got philanthropy involved. But we run programs in different countries. So this program I mentioned in Saudi Arabia, we'll be running starting hopefully in May. We charge for that process. Okay, but we are a not-for-profit foundation registered as a charity under the UK Charities Commission. Okay, and you can go anytime you look at the books and where we got the money from. So it's transparent. Okay, that's how we operate. Any other questions?
John, do you mind actually elaborating a little bit more about the model, about the different models that we...
You go. You mean what we charge for, what we don't charge for? Is that what you're trying to...
No, it's just basically we have like different models, which is basically, number one is basically for the entrepreneurs, which is basically to match the entrepreneurs with a mentor. The second program is more focusing on leadership component, which is more of the one we charge for. And this one is focusing on bringing leadership components through mentoring into an organization or within the community and within the startups and or the organizations. The third program is basically tailored for micro financial institutions, and it's basically to support the micro businesses through mentoring as well. And it's a bit different models. So these are the three models that we have.
And so just to give you an idea, we're working currently with the OCP company in Morocco, and we're taking their corporate executives and managers. We're training them in how to be a mentor, number one, and then we're matching them with entrepreneurs as part of their leadership development in one case, and part of their CSR number two at the same time. That's one program. The one which we're doing in Saudi Arabia is actually under a government initiative. We're working with a Saudi company, a training company, and we're institutionalizing mentoring in 6 locations in Saudi Arabia for them. What else have we missed out?
Just embedding the culture. That's the most important.
You got a question? No. Question?
Yeah. Going back to the depth of the matter, I think one of the key sources of frustration of entrepreneurs in this part of the world is that they, in terms of sophistication, most of the entrepreneurs you see in this room or anywhere else are by far superior than the people they interact with in the state apparatus, in terms of their policymakers, in terms of their jobs, in terms of the administrators who are, or the people who actually issue their licenses and permits. So I find it a little, I don't want to say narrow in terms of scope, but focusing on just the duo of entrepreneur and mentor, and forgetting that there is a huge state apparatus that is blocking the way of advancement of entrepreneurs, is pretending that the problem does not exist. So the question is, are you doing anything about that?
First of all, I acknowledge 100% what you're saying. I'm not going to mention the country or the organization, but there's a government organization I've been talking to now for 4 years, okay, to do a program with them. And if I counted the business development hours I've spent with them in terms of a cost, I wouldn't want to highlight the figure. And after 4 years, they asked us, please would you now write out for us what we should do? We did so. Would you now please give us a proposal for execution? We did so. We received an ITB to tender the whole package based upon our proposal 2 days ago.
But until this happens,
and I'm saying to myself, why am I wasting my time? So I'm acknowledging what you're saying.
Yes.
Absolutely. What are we doing about it? I think I've been quite vocal this evening on a number of issues to create awareness of issues that people need to address. Okay, and that's the only thing we can do. We're not going to get involved in politics.
I don't think this is politics.
That's about my pay grade.
This is capacity building. This
Oh,
is
absolutely.
not. This is not politics. We're not talking about regime.
In terms of capacity building,
Yes.
which is what we try, absolutely, I agree. We'll do that. But, and I accept, and that's why I kept on asking earlier, what are you trying to achieve? And is that the vision you've got? Agreed. I put up there a college earlier in terms of government. When I first went on the board of governors, I said, what's your vision as a school? A school having a vision? 2 years later we had a vision. The difference in the school in the last 4 years since I've been there 4 years now, the last 2 years after the vision paper is amazing. Completely amazing. Everyone now knows where we're heading, what we're trying to achieve and why we're trying to achieve it. Okay? That's the first point, that's the point I made to you earlier. That's the first thing that needs to be articulated and agreed.
Thank you.
Could conclude this question. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You need to take this out of here. I don't want to ruin your
طيب ان شاء الله. طيب ان شاء الله.
Thank you very much. Enjoyed it.